Hello, yes, a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Baldwin Sports Media NFL podcast coming to you at the end of week 4 of the NFL season, what used to be, the quarter way mark. As some people like to say, it used to be the quarter way mark because everyone plays 16 games. Week 4, you played 4 games, you're a quarter way through. It was never really quite true though, because you played 17 games. So you're a quarter way through the schedule. You're not necessarily a quarter way through your season. However, we're not even a quarter way through the schedule yet, because it's 17. So we're at like 3.8, something along those lines. Can't quite do the maths, but that is the stage we are at this point of the season. And of course, there is no shortage of big stories coming out. They are going to be all on field or on pitch matters, as it were. But before that, we need to do the admin for the show. And that is as simple as, thanking you as always for joining us. If you are new, don't forget you can like and subscribe on our social media platforms or leave a comment down below. The social medias are at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And then on Twitter, we are at MRB Sports Media. So feel free to give us a follow or a like on whatever platform you choose to do so on. And if you are a returning listener, then as always, thank you very much for listening and continuing to listen to us every single week. Right, with that out of the way, we need to dive into the big news of the week. And I suppose there's only really one place to start, and that is the Baltimore Ravens and the injury to Lamar Jackson. This obviously coming off the back of their loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, which we will dive into more later on. But the injury to Lamar Jackson doesn't appear to be too bad. When you heard the news coming out, you heard the stories of hamstring issues and the fact that he could have returned or was going to return to the game, but John Harbaugh said the injury was going to ensure that that wasn't going to happen. You may have feared the worst, especially as I pointed out in the past, Lamar Jackson has lost the benefit of the doubt when it comes to injuries. That's why for a couple of years I predicted them not to make the playoffs, because I predicted he couldn't stay fit in December because he had back-to-back big knee injuries. So could you really trust him down the stretch? Now, this injury, by all accounts, doesn't seem to be too bad. Brian Walker, or Brian Waker, not sure how to pronounce, could be Wacker, not sure, of the Baltimore Sun, reporting that he seems to be out 2 to 3 weeks, which again, for a hamstring situation, isn't all that bad. It could certainly have been a lot worse, and their schedule is somewhat favourable, because if it's the next 2 to 3 weeks, their schedule consists of the Houston Texans, the Los Angeles Rams, and then they have a bye week. So it may be that he's missing these next 2 games. You would think, just the way that the seasons have gone so far, that could very well be a 1-1. Maybe beat the Texans but lose to the Rams. And then the bye, chance to get fully recovered, and then they're back in it. But my main concern, if I was a Ravens fan, would be, what if it is worse? What if something happens and it gets aggravated and it's worse than they feared? They're already at 1-3. The Pittsburgh Steelers at the top of the AFC North are 3-1. Again, the Steelers have their bye, so they can't really gain any ground this week or lose any ground in a sense. But the Steelers are at the top with 3-1. What happens if the Ravens were to lose these next 2 games? Just say. Then they are 1-5, and there is a potential, again, depending on how things go, the Steelers could come out of it, or by the time the Ravens get off their bye, they could be 5-1, and the Ravens are 1-5, and then you're doing it without Lamar Jackson. Again, this is hypothetical if the injury is worse than we assumed. If it's just these 2 to 3 weeks, there is a small chance they get back to it. But either way you look at it, there is a chance that come week 7, the Ravens are 4 games behind the Steelers. And whilst the Baltimore Ravens have a very good squad, I still think when everyone is healthy, it is one of the best rosters in the entire league. Now they haven't been quite playing up to it, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But when they are all there, that is potentially one of the best rosters in the league. There is a chance they can get back into it. But even so, you are then also running the risk of Lamar Jackson having to bail you out every single week and putting more pressure on Lamar Jackson and leaning on him more, that means you could risk re-injuring Lamar Jackson. If it was a different situation, they could hide it in some sense. But if the defense is going to keep playing the way it has been playing, and if Derrick Henry is going to continue to fumble the ball in big moments, who does that? Who do you then have to rely on? Lamar Jackson. Maybe get him to run a bit more. Then what happens to that hamstring, especially if they feel like they have to rush him back? If that situation occurs where they are 1-5 and they feel like this is the only way they're going to get back into winning the division. This injury, even though it's 2 to 3 weeks, could very well set the course for the Baltimore Ravens to be out of the playoffs. Which, given the way that, again, one of the best rosters and the way that everyone has hyped them up and everyone talked about how may be their year, it is not out of the realms of possibility they don't even make the postseason, which I think is huge. It opens the gate. It opens the gate for a lot of teams in the AFC. The Steelers at the top of the AFC North are one. I think there is a scenario, especially if you look at the Browns being the Browns and the Bengals without Joe Burrow. This injury may have just handed the Steelers the AFC North, but we're going to touch on that a little bit later. But even within the AFC, knocking the Baltimore Ravens out of the playoffs, how big does that feel if you are even a wildcard team, knowing that that is one big team, one very, very good team you no longer have to deal with? If you're going to have to get, a wildcard team has to win 3 games, or whoever's on the bye, they don't have to play the Ravens at any point. I think that is absolutely huge in the context of the AFC and in the playoff race. Now, it is, again, we haven't even reached October yet. I am recording this at 2:10 on September the 30th. So we haven't reached October yet. But even so, this is a big injury. Even though it's over, what is meant to be, again, at the time of diagnosis and at the time of recording, a very short space of time. So this, if I'm a Ravens fan, I am very, very concerned with how this is going. And you just have to hope that at the very least, the defense can start doing what we believe they can do. Because if the offense isn't going to be there, if Cooper Rush isn't going to be able to play to Lamar Jackson's level and give you, the equivalent of 4 touchdowns a night, 28 points, if he's not going to be able to give you that, then what chance do the Ravens have? Unless the defense sorts themselves out and starts, getting teams down to less than 20 points. They are, again, this is a very dangerous situation for the Baltimore Ravens. Even for Lamar Jackson, this is huge. Because when it comes to do his next contract, do you not think the Ravens are at least going to look and say, hey, this is another injury that, cost us a season? Can we trust you to stay healthy for all 17 games of a season? I don't think they can. So again, short injury could hurt the Ravens for this season and could potentially hurt Lamar Jackson in the very, very long term. So everyone concerning the situation has to hope that it is indeed a best case scenario, 2 to 3 weeks, but they have to come out of these next 2 games with at least 1 win. Simply have to, if they are to have any chance of being able to, again, I hate to say it, but salvage their season once they come off the bye and give themselves a fighting chance of being in a division race and, a seeding race with the rest of the AFC. So, big injury to keep your eye on. Moving on, we move on to 2 other injuries that aren't quarterbacks, but are potentially as significant as the ones suffered by Lamar Jackson, mainly because they are far more severe. We're going to start with Miami Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill, and he appears to be out. Well, I say appears to be. The common consensus, anyone who saw the footage will tell you that he is out for the rest of the season, and there's even some suggestion that it's so severe that it's going to impact how he goes into the 2026 season as well. Now, this is crucial for 2 reasons. One, I think given the state of the Dolphins, even though they won last night against the New York Jets, there was some suggestion that there could be not necessarily a fire sale, but when the trade deadline comes around, they are going to be sellers rather than buyers just because of the way things are going. And yeah, Mike Florio was talking about there is a chance that Tyreek Hill could wind up back on the Chiefs, especially if they didn't quite get back to the way things potentially could be at the wide receiver position. They could always go back and go to a familiar face. That option is definitely off the table. But also, again, looking further afield, I said this about Nick Bosa when he was fired or when he got injured with the San Francisco 49ers. I thought that was an injury that could cost Kyle Shanahan his job, because that's ultimately going to probably lose them the Super Bowl and it's going to be all a bust for them. Whatever small chance I think of the Dolphins maybe turning things around, I think that probably went down with Tyreek Hill. And then as a result, I think this is probably going to cost Mike McDaniel his job, probably at the end of the season, but I would not be surprised if they end up deciding to make a move before then as well, maybe around Thanksgiving, and then get in an interim coach to see if they can turn things around and then move on from there. But also, as a result of this, if they do decide to go down that route of a new coach and someone is going to look for, additional draft picks in order to get the team back their way, Tyreek Hill could very well have been, not necessarily a first round pick, but he could have got you a very good return in terms of draft capital. That I think has also gone as well, especially if they're talking about him and his recovery moving into next season in terms of recovery. So I think this is going to be very crucially and very damaging for the Dolphins, again, short term, long term, and for Tyreek Hill, short term and long term. So it's that's going to be harsh for them. The other one, as I said, also concerns a wide receiver, and this is Mailk Nabers. And again, crucial injury for someone like Jackson Dart. I feel sorry for Jackson Dart in all this, because he was going to need a very reliable weapon to showcase himself now that he is the starting quarterback of the Giants. He's now lost that. There's going to be more emphasis on him and what can he do, but without that reliable number one weapon, how fair of an assessment are we going to be able to get from that? And then as a result, similar to Mike McDaniels, I think this may also cost Brian Daboll his job as well. I think again it was always sort of on the hot seat, especially now that he was given a quarterback. If he can maybe produce something, if Jackson Dart can maybe turn this round, then by all means, I mean, a great result on the weekend. But if they can't, and Mailk Nabers is a large part of this, because again he doesn't have that main weapon for him to throw to, then I think this is something that's going to cost Brian Daboll his job, because again, did you really get the results? So two big injuries to two big wide receivers, and I think it's gonna I think it's gonna be very crucial to see how that impacts the coaches of those teams moving forward. More or less so, the quarterbacks and everything else that surrounds them. And with that, we move on to our roundup around the league. Again, not going to go through every single game, but just the main ones that sort of caught my attention. And the first one sort of go back to our first story of the game, first story of the podcast, rather, and that's the Chiefs and the Ravens. Now, I just want to temper any expectations or any commentators upon that say that the Chiefs are quote unquote back because they beat the Ravens. Bear in mind, this is again, I wasn't one that was saying the Chiefs are done, but I'm not going to be one saying the Chiefs are back, because I don't want a result against the Ravens, especially these Ravens that have not been have not been very good. Are 1-3, defense has been carved up, and in the last stage, obviously without Lamar Jackson, I'm not going to say that this is the Chiefs back in Super Bowl contention automatically, although, I always had them in Super Bowl contention, but I'm not going to say they've come all the way back in that sense. So I just want to temper that. Yes, it was good to see some improvement, and their receiving core is getting better and was always going to be that case. Now they're going to get, more players back. Then, yeah, it's always going to be that. But I don't want this to be the grand proclamation. I know the Chiefs are just going to go undefeated from here till the end of the season. I just don't think that we can use that based off this one game, honestly. So Chiefs are quote unquote back, but that's only really if you felt that they were gone to begin with. I don't think they were. Moving on to the game in Ireland, and the Steelers coming out with the win over the Minnesota Vikings. Now, as I said earlier, I think this now means it is the Steelers' division to lose, because again, 3-1, a bunch of injuries especially on the defensive side of the ball. Now they've got a bye week to get these things back in order. The offense seems to be moving slightly better. And if you look at the AFC North, with the Browns, as I said earlier, the Browns continuing to be the Browns, I don't see them turning it around in any way, shape, or form. The Bengals, without Joe Burrow, I just don't see it. Again, if they make a trade for Russell Wilson's been mentioned a couple of times, I'll believe it when I see it. I can't remember who it was, but someone was saying if the Bengals are going to phone the Giants to get a quarterback, they'd be better off getting Jameis Winston. I kind of go with that line. Just I think Russell Wilson's played his way out of it. But either way, unless the Bengals sort out their quarterback situation, I don't see how the Bengals get back into it. And with the Ravens injuries, again, this very well could be the Steelers' division to lose. And there could very well mean a home playoff game for the first time in a while in front of fans as well, because we had one at home during the COVID year that was played in an empty stadium. So I said this last year, but I feel like Mike Tomlin doesn't have any excuses this year. I said last year that finally everything was going to work out for him, and barring a spate of injuries, then he had no excuses. Okay, if you wanted to blame the offensive coordinators going back a few years, blame Matt Canada. Okay, you finally got yourself a decent offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith. If you didn't think you had the quarterback, fine. You've got Justin Fields, a first round pick, and Russell Wilson, multiple time Pro Bowler, and someone who, again, was talked about as a Hall of Fame player. So you have a quarterback. They go one and done in the playoffs. That's it. Again, I felt that could have been a reason for Mike Tomlin to move on, but they obviously didn't. Now, if they manage to get their players back healthy at the other side of the bye, then again, there is no excuse because now you've started off very strong. You've got, again, Hall of Fame quarterback at your disposal. Baltimore Ravens with injuries. Everything is going in your favor. You have to win this division and win a playoff game. But in my mind, again, this is the Steelers' division to lose given the state of the AFC North. So you have to feel that they have to take advantage of that if Mike Tomlin is going to survive his job come the end of the season. The Sunday night football game, Packers Cowboys. I'm not going to get too deep into again. Are the Packers worse than we thought they were, or are the Cowboys better than we thought they were? All that stuff. I do just want to say I've never been a fan of the NFL overtime. I think you see so many players contest it and say, it's not worth playing, or I'd hate playing for a draw or whatever. I think it is time to change it up. I think you can't just play regular football, just give them an extra 10 minutes. I think there does need to be some level of extra jeopardy to it. I think tweak it. If you want to go to the college overtime rules, I think that would be fine. Start from the 25-yard line, going in, or if you want to do it just 2-point conversions until you stopped, fine. I just think playing extra football, especially for 10 minutes, I just don't like it. I think it doesn't quite serve the purpose that it's trying to, especially in the regular season. If you want to know, in the off season, the postseason rather, then fine, keep things the way they are. And if you have to keep going to endless overtimes, you do. But in the regular season, I do think you need to tweak it a bit like the NHL does with with overtime. Okay, in the regular season at least, we'll go to 3-on-3 for 5 minutes, and then if you don't if there's no winner after that, then we'll go to a shootout. I think that's something the NFL needs to look at. Again, if you want to make it 7-on-7, and just shorten the field 50 yards, just play 50 yards in. Or as I say, go to college overtime rules, 25 yards on, 25 yards and in, 11-on-11, go for that. If you do want to make it slightly gimmicky, then you can. I've always made the argument you should have a quarterbacks, do a best of 5 crossbar challenge, have them stand at pick a yard line, the 10-yard line, the 20-yard line, get best of 5 to see who can hit the crossbar, or target practice or something along those lines. Maybe get the kickers to do field goal competitions from, I think people said from 50 yards, but the way kickers are, maybe you want to move it to 55 or something, best of 5, something. I think in the regular season, I think the current overtime format just doesn't quite work for me, so I'd be in favor of changing it. I think those are just some suggestions. Moving on, and to the reigning Super Bowl champions. And last week, I spoke about the Eagles' championship mentality for being able to come back from a very large scoreline. back against the Los Angeles Rams. And I think this weekend again was another weekend of, they are not slowing down in any way with their win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The fact they could build up to a big lead and avoid the total collapse, as it were, to beat the Buccaneers, I think is also a good thing. How many teams have crumbled once they start losing the momentum, just go on after that. I think to be able to play in the way that they did, I think just goes to show. I think they are the best team in the NFL right now. Again, very strong roster, and also kudos to them, especially after all the talk about the tush push, to then go and pull the fake tush push. I think stroke of genius. It gives teams other things to think about, and also it means the tush push is going to be more effective because teams are going to have that one extra body just on the outside, just in case. That's going to leave more gaps in the middle for Jalen Hurts to go through. So brilliant execution of the tush push. I would have saved it for maybe later in the season, but because now you've shown your hand a little bit early. But either way, happy for them, good for that. And since we started the show talking about injuries, it's only fair we end the show talking about injuries. San Francisco 49ers losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, that's one of those, you can't tell me that Nick Bosa doesn't make a big difference in that game. I give the 49ers an extra win. Again, these are players, big important players are going down across the season. These are players that are going to impact seasons and, as I say, potentially impact jobs as well. So this might just be the first big loss for the 49ers when it comes to playing without Nick Bosa. I am 90% sure there are going to be more moving forward. And two quick notes just before we wrap things up. Bad Bunny being announced as the Super Bowl halftime act. I don't know. It's not my kind of music, so I'm not exactly too thrilled about it. I do just kind of wonder exactly what audience the NFL is going for when it comes to their halftime. You look at the past couple of years, maybe it's overcompensating for going down a certain road where there being predominantly rock acts for the majority of the time, and maybe they're trying to switch it back, bring in a new audience. Kind of get I kind of get it, but at the same time, you just have to wonder how many people are really going to be looking at it because it is one of those big games. Is there anyone that's around that's saying, "Oh, I'm going to tune in just for the Super Bowl halftime show"? Given that it is the most watched event in America every single year, I kind of understand maybe an act like Taylor Swift and all the talk around that. Yes, I can understand she might bring in a new audience that wouldn't be watching the Super Bowl. There are some acts as well, maybe Beyonce as well on that level that would be watching that wouldn't normally be watching. Bad Bunny, I'm not too sure if that's an audience of fans that wasn't going to be watching the game anyway. So it's just a bit weird. But either way, I haven't been a fan of the Super Bowl acts the past couple of years, so I've tuned off past couple of years to be brutally honest. So I'm not really fussed, but we'll just see how that goes. But yeah, interested to see they've gone down that way. And our final story of the week, away from the world of the NFL, and this one concerns hockey and concerns the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are my local team. For those of you who didn't maybe see it, the Penguins went a slightly different way to the traditional retirement of players. You've seen it's been a thing for the past 10, 15 years where a player will sign a ceremonial 1 day contract so they can retire as a member of a certain team after they've been away for a couple of years. The first one in my memory that I can vividly recall was LaDainian Tomlinson retiring again, signing a 1 day contract, retire as a member of the San Diego. I believe it was the San Diego Chargers back at that point. So doing that, but the Penguins went a entirely different way with their former goalkeeper Marc-Andre Fleury. They brought him back for a preseason game, and I think that is so much better than these 1 day contracts. Let the fans have one last chance to cheer for their player. Again, you brought that out to the NFL. Say, I'll just pick an example here. Aaron Rodgers. Let him go back if he retires this offseason. Let him go back and have one final drive with the Green Bay Packers next offseason and officially retire. I think that would be a much better way to say goodbye and as a send off than again, just a one-day time where the only people there are the press and photographers and executives and whatever. I just think that's a great. I think that's a great way to do it. And the Penguins played it off brilliantly. Let Marc-Andre Fleury play the third period. They even had a shootout at the end. Unfortunately, Marc-Andre Fleury let in the winning goal. So the last thing he did as a Penguin and as a hockey player was be flat on his face, let a goal in. But either way, it was just a brilliant, brilliant night. I tuned in to watch it. The Penguins sold out a preseason game, which is something that very rarely happens. So yeah, it was just an absolutely brilliant story and a brilliant way to finish off a career. And I think more teams should follow that moving forward. But moving forward, we have to sign off because that is the end of this show. I want to thank you, as always. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe on our podcast platform on YouTube, and don't forget to check out our other socials. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. So check us out there if you are new or if you are a returning listener. As always, thank you very much for listening. And until next week, take care. And as always, stay safe.